3 days later, Minnie sent him a letter, part of which he kept for the rest of his life, tucked behind a photograph of her at 16. The letter is courageous and sad. It breathes intimacy and renunciation, and it must have recorded for William a close, telling moment. Minnie's strength and grace can still be felt across 135 years. The more I live, the more I feel that there must be some comfort somewhere for the mass of people suffering and sad, outside of that which Stoicism gives. 1,000 times when I see a poor person in trouble, it almost breaks my heart that I can't say something to comfort them. It is on the tip of my tongue to say it, and I can't, for I have always felt myself the unutterable sadness and mystery that envelope us all. I shall take some of your chloral tonight if I don't sleep. Don't let my letter of yesterday make you feel that we are not very near to each other, friends at heart, although practically being much with you or even writing to you would not be good for me. Too much strain on one key will make it snap, and there is an attitude of mind, not a strength of intellect by any means, in which we are much alike. Goodbye, your affectionate cousin, Mary Temple. Minnie must have tried to distance herself from William in an effort to save herself from the intensity, the strain of their being together. It was a renunciation William would have approved and honored, even as it left him emptier and more self-despising than ever. When after William's death, his wife, Alice, read the long, moving section on Minnie Temple that ends Henry James's Notes of a Son and Brother, she told Henry, "You may not understand in the least how I feel, but it almost seems as if I had had all that she deserved. Were you ever haunted by a vicarious atonement feeling? That someone else was going without, that you might be blessed?" There are two mysteries about Minnie's relationship with William. One is romantic, the other is religious, and Alice's remark here hints at both. On January 19th, William wrote Harry to say that father had a couple of articles in the Atlantic on marriage, and that he, William, had just read The House of the Seven Gables, Hawthorne's romance about a family curse. "I little expected so great a work," said William. He also noted that he was still suffering from a recent overdose, which I took for the fun of it, of chloral, that is, chloral hydrate. We have to wonder whether for the fun of it covers the case or whether he was edging towards suicide again. 6 days after this, Minnie was again writing to John Gray, saying, among other things, "Willie James sometimes tells me to behave like a man and a gentleman, if I wish to outwit fate. What a real person he is! He is to me, in nearly all respects, head and shoulders above other people." Minnie was now very thin, terribly weak, and no longer able to sleep. Her fate seemed to make nonsense of William's belief that people can control their lives, and he collapsed in on himself in yet another crisis, writing in his diary for February 1st, 1870, "Today I about touched bottom, and perceive plainly that I must face the choice with open eyes. Shall I frankly throw the moral business overboard, or shall I follow it, and it alone, making everything else merely stuff for it?" By moral business, William meant the view that, after all, we are able to will and to choose our path in life, that we are not powerless pawns in an all-determined universe. It is not what fate does to us that matters. What matters is what we do with what fate does to us. A good part of William's problem was due, he now saw, to his having accepted the view that we are powerless in the hands of fate. He now vowed, however, to give the moral business, the idea that we can choose, a serious, steady, and unconditional trial, rather than using it piecemeal to patch out the gaps which fate left in my other kinds of activity. Perhaps he was moved, who wouldn't have been, by Minnie's refusal to quit. On February 10th, she wrote another extraordinary letter to William. It is 12 pages long, and only parts of it survive. In a tone wholly new, and unprecedented in James's correspondence, Minnie gives him a solemn and moving account of her recent struggles with religious belief. The letter is clearly a continuation on paper of an earlier discussion. She had been all along unable to really believe in Christianity, except in the Channing Unitarian version, which talks about Jesus as an example of human perfectibility. Her Uncle Henry had tried to get her to see how there might be real truth in the idea of atonement, a mysterious intervention of God to save us and make us happy by the vicarious suffering of Christ once for all. As Minnie told it, she had been so tired physically and mentally, so in need of rest, that she at last accepted this idea, but only briefly. By February 10th, she had renounced it, telling Willie, "I am after all a good deal of a pagan." With her clear-eyed candor, Minnie refused Orthodox Christianity and declared instead what she was able to believe. If I had lived before Christ, music would have come like a divine voice to tell me to be true to my whole nature, to stick to my key note, and have faith that my life would, in some way or other, if faithfully lived, swell the entire harmony. This is a grander music than the music of the spheres. Of course, the question will always remain, what is one's true life? And we must each try and solve it for ourselves. I confess that I am. The rest of the letter is missing. Minnie Temple died 26 days after writing this. William recorded the event in a way he recorded no other. On a page of his diary, all by itself, he drew a crude grave marker with the initials M.T. and the date of her death. Part of William James died with Minnie Temple. The part that remained learned to accept. 13 days later, on March 22nd, William tried to answer Minnie's last question. What is one's true life? By that big part of me that's in the tomb with you, he wrote, may I realize and believe in the immediacy of death. He had been sunk in and preoccupied with his own troubles, but Minnie alone of his contemporaries had broken through his self-involvement, and now it was Minnie who was dead. Startled by guilt, but moved too by Minnie's finer spirit, he tried not just to mutter self-indulgently about suicide, but to take Minnie's road, as he tried to declare as fully as he could what that way really meant. Minnie, your death makes me feel the nothingness of all our egotistical fury. The inevitable release is sure. Wherefore take our turn kindly, whatever it contains. Ascend to some sort of partnership with fate. And since tragedy is at the heart of us, go to meet it. Work it to our ends instead of dodging it all our days and being run down by it at last. Use your death or your life. It's all one meaning. Tat tva tvam asi. That last phrase is from the Chandogya Upanishad. It literally means that you are. And it comes from a passage in which a father is trying to instruct his son about the nature of the ultimate reality of the universe and his son's inescapable place in it. After showing that everything has its root in being, the father declares that being is the soul of the world, that the son, as part of that world, has himself a share in that being. Tat Tvam Asi asserts that you are that ultimate being. The principle of God is common to both the universe and the individual. William James's use of this phrase at this time can only mean that he had realized, as by a sudden revelation and not a Christian one, that Minnie's spirit was the same as, and therefore the key to, the spirit of the whole universe. It would be 32 more years before James could return to deal with this central insight, this revelation in the mysticism chapter of the varieties of religious experience. This overcoming of all the usual barriers between the individual and the absolute, he wrote in that book, is the great mystic achievement. In mystic states, we both become one with the absolute, and we become aware of our oneness. This is the everlasting and triumphant mystical tradition. That art thou, say the Upanishads, and the Vedantists add, not a part, not a mode of that, but identically that, the absolute spirit of the world. However it was, at last, between them, Minnie's death left William James stunned, as though he had been struck by lightning or by revelation. Minnie's engagement with religion made religion real for him for the first time. The closing days of Minnie Temple's life marked the first time in James's life that he was able to accept the active religious struggle of another person as a valid religious experience. What Minnie felt and said as her death swung nearer was not theoretical or theological or historical or ecclesiastical. It was not a collapse or a concession. It was not one of Father's ideas. Minnie's death, as Henry James was to say many years later, marked the end for him and for William of youth. But it was the end of more than youth for William. It was the wreck of the romantic intensities and intimacies and soul-sharing that early love sometimes comes wrapped in. It was also his first glimpse of something else, a view of life as larger than our individual lives. What he could not have foreseen was that worse trouble was just around the corner.